talking about money in a way that resonates with women versus in a way that resonates with men. And there is a difference. There's that famous book out there, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. And that is true in the financial sector as well. And so I was a little bit hesitant at first to your question. Would
Mhm.
women accept us? Would they accept me in particular? If I said that here's my business, I focus predominantly on women, I was a little bit concerned that they would think of it as a sales tactic or a marketing ploy. But those concerns were alleviated really right away, partially because I knew what we were doing already worked. I knew the way we spoke to women and the way we presented money and talked about money resonated with women. But I also discovered why most men weren't having the same success with women.
Welcome to the Generations of Wealth podcast. I am your host, Eric Dombeck. The topic is the most damaging money myths women need to bust. And Ed Vargo is a financial advisor or a financial planner, actually, that kind of caters his business towards women. It wasn't the original thought process, but it became a role that he took on and is very, very good at. So again, I don't think this topic has been out there anywhere that I've ever seen. We are always trying to bring you different viewpoints. So with that, let's bring on our guest. And here he is, Mr. Ed Vargo. Ed, thank you so much for giving us some of your time today.
Glad to be here, Derek. Appreciate the time.
Absolutely. You've got an awesome topic, something that I know isn't really discussed very often, if ever at all. And before we get to that, though, can you give me a little bit of background about yourself, your family, your history, and then we'll talk a lot about money myths that women need to bust.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, I've been a financial advisor for going on 25 years now. And in that realm, we do comprehensive financial planning. So, looking at the entire picture of a client's life. So, from the nuts and bolts of budgeting all the way into estate planning and intergenerational planning, we kind of do it all. And so I've been in a business for 25 years. And in that time, we developed a sort of a niche, I guess, in working with women in particular women going through significant life changes or transitions. So, as an example, someone who lost a husband or a spouse, they could be going through a divorce, maybe transitioning to retirement. So, we're a bit unique in this space in that we do predominantly work with women or women led households. And I guess part of the reason for that is I have a female dominated household myself. I have 5 daughters. And so, all between the ages of 19 and 26.
Dear Lord.
So, yeah, that always catches people by surprise. It certainly caught me by surprise. In fact, having 5 daughters, I never thought I'd be in that position, but it's certainly been a blessing. They've been wonderful, really seeing them grow from young girls, young kids and babies running around to young ladies and trying to find their way in the world. And so I guess it's not so much a surprise to find myself working in professionally in a space that's dominated or predominantly with women.
That is a lot of future weddings to pay for. I hope business is going well.
Yeah, I always say one of the good things about being a financial planner is I know the numbers. But
Mhm.
one of the bad things about being a financial planner is I know the numbers because they're exceedingly large when you're multiplying really anything times five. And of course, with my wife and I, it's seven. So if we go on any trips, if we do anything, it's a lot to navigate, and it's certainly gotten to be more expensive and a little bit more challenging as they've gotten older. But I'm happy to do it. Yeah, businesses, fortunately, we're doing all right and we're hanging in there. And they're the light of my life, so it's easy to focus and put attention and time toward them.
So I'll just kind of ask this in as nice a way as I can. Do you feel like advising women from a male role puts you in kind of a bad position sometimes? Like do they feel like it's just some man telling me what to do again, or is that not really a factor?
When I first started going down this path of, we probably made this shift to work and focus and promote ourselves and market ourselves predominantly as a firm that works with women about 15 years ago. And so during the first 10 years, we didn't have that niche or that focus. But upon inspection, we realized, and I did a deep dive, sort of re-engineered the business and said, well, where are our clients? Where are they coming from? Who do we work well with? And overwhelmingly, we had a female dominated client base. It wasn't by design per se, but upon looking back on why that was, how it came about, it's really the way we engage with clients. It's our focus on comprehensive financial planning. It's talking about money in a way that resonates with women versus in a way that resonates with men. And there is a difference. There's that famous book out there, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And that is true in the financial sector as well. And so I was a little bit hesitant at first to your question. Would
Mhm.
women accept us? Would they accept me in particular? If I said that here's my business, I've focused predominantly on women, I was a little bit concerned that they would think of it as a sales tactic or a marketing ploy. But those concerns were alleviated really right away, partially because I knew what we were doing already worked. I knew the way we spoke to women and the way we presented money and talked about money resonated with women. But I also discovered why most men weren't having the same success with women. So it takes a little bit of understanding of how the industry grew up. So the personal financial services industry grew up with male advisors working with and selling to other men. That's who had the money, right? Economically, the industry grew up in the early 1900s, maybe even before that. And so naturally, it was male to male. And so the language of finance, the infrastructure of finance, and how it just evolved was all geared toward men, which makes sense. That's how the market operates, not just the stock market, but markets in general. But as women started to gain their economic footing and their economic power and finding their equal footing, but we're still left with this legacy of very masculine language, a very heavily male dominated industry, trying to work with women, but having some difficulty in doing so. And so for us, I didn't find that was a barrier, but I think in general, it is a barrier if you're
Mhm.
basically taking if you're trying to take and modify the old world way of doing things that works well with men and just tinker with it and tweak it and try to make it work for women, it tends to fall flat.
Okay.
Yeah, and so our business is built from the ground up for the way women think about money and how they engage with money. We understand that the female point of view as well as as well as I can as a male. I'm not saying I know how women think per se, but
Oh,
um,
that'd be a definite magic trick.
yeah, I
Um,
won't go that far, but when it comes to money, I have a pretty good understanding of it. So at this point, no, there's no barrier. And I think in some cases, I think there is some comfort, especially when we're dealing with, say, a divorce scenario. That can go either way. It can work to my advantage as a male, or it can work to my disadvantage. In a widow situation, it tends to work to my advantage because you think about that situation, a wife and husband have been doing something together, managing their finances together for a long time. The husband's now gone, and now the wife has to manage it on her own. And so to have somebody she trusts, a male figure, can be comforting in a situation like that. But it has to come from a place of authenticity and empathy, and you can't really manufacture it.
so just to, I guess, clear up one thing for me, financial advisor, that can be a broad term, right? What are you specifically focusing on? Is it estate planning? Is it, you know, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, life insurance, the whole gamut?
Yeah, that's a good point. The term financial advisor is murky at best. I think broadly applied, when you think financial advisor, I think most people in their mind think stockbroker.
Mhm.
That's an understatement. I think the financial advisors out there, all of us would say, well, we probably do a little more than just be a stockbroker. But in reality, most financial advisors, their primary role, their primary value proposition is managing investments for their clients. And whether they do that from an annuity lens, which I think is more rare and hopefully not the norm, it's definitely not the norm. No offense to annuity reps, but I think that the marketplace is more dynamic than just one product type.
Mhm.
But for us as a financial advisor, the way we engage, and I use the word financial planner, it's a little bit more accurate and descriptive. We begin with the end in mind. We do comprehensive financial plans that take into account the totality of a client's life. That's what we try to do. So when you think about what money is designed to do or what we need it to do, it should fund the needs in our lives. So whether that's retirement, educating our kids, weddings, putting food on our table today, protecting us if one of us is no longer here. It has a lot of different jobs. So as a financial planner, my job is to understand all the different roles that money has in a person's life and then help them understand how best to maximize the efficiency or the efficacy of those dollars. So what tends to happen is people make money and they waste money, and oftentimes they don't realize they're wasting money. They don't realize they're being inefficient, or they realize it and they can't fix it, right? Because money's not an easy thing to wrap your arms around. So I would say more, and then we niche that down in the sense that a woman going through a divorce has patently different needs than a married person who is not. I mean, they're very different, or if you're single, or if you have kids. So our focus on working in those more complicated situations where there's a lot of activity going on, a divorce, a death, transitioning to retirement, where there's transitions in of someone's life, we excel in those areas.
So what are the a few of the differences between, planning for a man versus planning for a woman? And we'll use the example of going through a divorce, right? What Give us some examples.
Well, structurally, there are some headwinds that women bump up against financially that men don't. For example, women live longer. So if you have a lifespan that is 10, 15, 20% longer than your male counterparts, it's going to be harder to plan for to plan for that. You need more money because you're living a lot longer than your male counterparts. The other thing is that on average, and these are just statistics, that women tend to make less money on average than men do. So they have this double whammy where they on average make less money and yet are living longer, have a smaller pension or smaller social security, and yet are living longer. So that's important for women to understand that there are these headwinds. They're not nefarious. It's just the way things work or the way things are. I mean, women live longer. We want that's a good thing, but we have to understand that the planning is a little different in that regard. Now, more fundamentally, when you look at how women and men think about money, I can best explain it this way. This comes from the study of behavioral finance, which is taking a psychological lens to money. And so it's a whole branch in finance, but the idea is like, why do people make certain decisions around money? What is driving their behaviors? And so when it comes to money, men tend to be more concrete thinkers, or they tend to gravitate toward things more than women do. So a great example is there are so many more male engineers because men, on average, okay, this is an on average conversation, on average, men like things more than women do. And on average, women gravitate towards people and relationships more so than men do. That's why there's far more female nurses. And so when you think about money, money in itself is a thing. It's intangible, but it's a thing in the sense that it's not a person or people, it's not a relationship. So men just naturally tend to be more comfortable in working with money, dealing with money than women do. And when
Mhm.
you're more comfortable with something, you tend to engage with it more directly. So women have an aversion toward money more so than men do. So you just take the average woman, the average man, put them side by side, and almost certainly the guy is going to raise his hand. We say, "Tell me about money. Do you like it? Do you enjoy it? Do you engage with it?" Way more often, the guy's going to raise his hand.
Yeah.
And so that's a barrier, right? Because if you're not interested as in money, and let's say you are in a relationship, and if we're in a relationship, there's always this division of labor, right? We don't both do the exact same tasks. We tend to carve them out. 9 out of 10 times, the guy's going to raise his hand and say, "Hey, I'll handle the money stuff. I like it." And the woman's like, "That's fine. I really don't like it." And so it creates this dichotomy. In a divorce situation, that's particularly bad for women because they're at a disadvantage. They don't know about the money. And a big part of the divorce process is the money.
Hmm.
So that's one area where men and women are different. Women are, on average, a little bit more risk averse, more loss averse than men are. Men are willing to take more risks, which means they tend to invest in the stock market more readily. Men tend to have greater confidence or are overconfident. They have an overconfidence bias. Sometimes that works for you, sometimes it doesn't.
Hmm.
But men are more willing to sort of raise their hand and say, "Hey, I'll tackle that." And women may be a little bit more cautious about approaching it. A good a good example of that is like for a job promotion. They've done a bunch of studies, and even if the guy's not ready, he's not really has the skill set or built it or has the expertise or the time, he'll throw his hat in the ring and say, "Hey, we'll see what happens." Whereas women tend to be a bit more cautious, say, "No, I want to make sure I have all my ducks in a row. I have the expertise." And just by having more at bats, so to speak,
Mhm.
men tend to be promoted a little bit faster because they're asking for those promotions a little bit more frequently. So it really is interesting and fascinating when we look at the differences between how men and women think about money and how those differences stack on top of each other, and ultimately where it leads to the place where women are less financially literate than their male counterparts. Not that either side are particularly financially literate, but men tend to be a little bit more
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I mean, the general population, it's been a pet peeve of mine for years. Kids coming out of high school, they don't know anything about finances. And even if they take an economics class, or like my daughter's 18, she's a senior in high school. She's taken their business 101 and their other finance classes, and it's a joke. I mean, she's been involved in our business since she was 11 or 12 years old. So we talk about return on investment and all these different things in the real estate investing world. And she sat through these classes, and I asked her, I said, "Did you challenge your teacher at all?" And she didn't really want to make waves, um, which she gets that from her mother apparently, because I would have. But the answer, or the reality is, they come out of high school, and the first thing they do is rack up debt. They don't save, they don't invest, and they don't know any better because their parents don't know any better. So it's
Yeah,
frustrating.
yeah, it's a vicious cycle. And it's one of the reasons that we started actually a sister company called EnlightenHer, which is a women's financial education and coaching company. Burning River is a wealth management company, which means we work with a small number of mostly fairly affluent people. So
Hmm.
our footprint, our ability to impact the world at large is minimized because we can only work maybe with a couple hundred households. Whereas with EnlightenHer, using a financial coaching and education model, digital platform, doing some online courses, we're looking to build that out. We're trying to reach the masses more so and trying to overcome exactly what you said just there, which is parents don't really know that much about money. They're not teaching their kids. The schools aren't teaching their kids. And then those kids grow up to not know much about money, and it's just a vicious cycle. And what we're trying to do is to get out in front of it and help women, in our case, try to help women, but really the principles apply to men and women. But understanding just the basics of personal finance. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or a financial advisor to really take some of these keystone principles of finance, apply it, and do well for yourself. But that's really not happening today. So we're trying to change that, slowly but surely.
Well, and that's part of the reason why I wanted you on the show, because everything that we talk about here is not just real estate investing. It's all of the key factors to create generational wealth, but that's also the spiritual side of things, and the family dynamic. You're, as you told us, you have a wife and 5 daughters. I imagine you have a little bit different family dynamic than many of my listeners, just because of all the estrogen running through your house. God bless you. And how do you work with other people? You've got all that experience. You've clearly have been successful at dealing with women. How do you help women and men who are not in a divorce situation? Maybe help women talk to their spouses about finances. Do you have any nuggets there?
Well, I think the key is having open lines of communication. And I don't think that most relationships, let's say husband and wife relationships, or really any partnerships, um, I find that there's not as much conversations about money. I'm not talking like day to day, what did we spend this weekend on groceries, but like big picture stuff. What do we want to get out of life? And
Hmm.
how does our money support that? And I think that's a difference between how we think about money and how we utilize money in a client's life versus I think maybe even most financial advisors. So it's this idea that, okay, what is the purpose of our money? I mean, so let's take the money aside. If I were to sit down with, if my wife and I are talking about what do we want to get out of life, we would talk about, well, when do we want to make work optional? Where do we want to live? Do we want to be snowbirds or not? How do we want to engage with our children and grandchildren down the road? Is it important for us to be able to pass something on to future generations or to pass on to charities, et cetera? So we're having high level conversations about what are our values, and then our money backs into that.
The best negotiators don't just respond to objections. They dismantle them before they ever come up. Inside Elite Negotiations Academy, you'll learn how to spot concerns early, address them with confidence, and keep conversations moving toward a yes without pressure or games. We walk through real negotiations, real objections, and real outcomes, so you know exactly what to say and why it works. It's not about slick sales tactics. It's about understanding people, earning trust, and leading the conversation. Join now for just $49 per month for your first 3 months at EliteNegotiationsAcademy.com. Because the best way to overcome objections is to never give them a chance to grow.
Meaning, if I know that it's important to me to provide college education for my kids or therefore my grandkids, we know that's going to cost a certain amount of money. And so we can start to make different decisions with our money with that in mind versus we don't have that conversation. We kind of think that education is important to us, our grandkids' education is important to us, but because it's not a conversation, it's not a goal, it's not written down someplace, it's not paid attention to, and we don't pay attention to something, nothing really happens, or not as, I wouldn't say nothing good happens, but it just doesn't really take on what it could be if you paid more attention. So if I were to, what we tend to do with clients is we sit down and say, well, what's important to you? What's important to you out of life? Let's get it on pen to paper. Let's define it a little bit. If you want to make work optional at age 62, do you want to have, what type of lifestyle do you aspire to? Let's get it on paper. Where do you want to live? Do you want to be a snowbird? Do you want to sell your house and move to Florida or sunny Wisconsin? We can do
Exactly.
any of these things, right? So we start to put pen to paper, find what their goals and values are, and then we talk about the money side of it. But the money side comes way late in the conversation. Whereas I think when most people think about money, they're immediately running to, I got to create a budget. I have this much money. What do I do with it? And that's a little bit cart before the horse.
Well, and I think when you start talking to somebody about budgets and it just seems cold and it might cause friction between a husband and wife where we have a budget and now one or the other deviated from that budget and pretty soon they're kind of butting heads instead of, as you said, and as we talk to our people about, having a vision for your life. And this is why we're going to either cut back or even better, not cut back, just make better investments, make more money, not necessarily work more, but make more money, get educated to do that. But I know I've talked to people many times and they say, well, the only way we're ever going to be able to retire is we have to save X number of dollars. Many people don't save their way to retirement. Most people don't save their way to retirement. They need advisors, they need investments, things like that. But to just work a job and say, I'm going to save money and put it in what makes me cringe, a bank CD or, a savings vehicle, right? As opposed to saving money and investing it through advisors. They typically don't get there. And the phrase I really like that you're saying is, at what age do you want to be work optional? Because people ask me all the time, when are you going to retire? I'm 49 years old. And my answer is always never. I really love what I do. But when is work going to be optional for me? Well, soon. That's the goal, So I like that phrasing way better than planning for retirement. Planning for, when work is optional.
Yeah, it lands differently because, like, to your point, there's a lot of folks out there where the word retirement doesn't resonate with them. They'll say things like, I'm never going to retire. And that might be true, right? They really enjoy what they're doing today. They enjoy the work, the grind, going every day to have a purpose. And so retirement is, I think, a poorly chosen word. It's used to misuse, I think, very often. Sometimes you have no choice. Someone says, I'm going to work forever, but they can't. Right? Physically, they can't. Something
Right.
happens in their life to where they can't. So as a planner, I'm thinking about things that go right and things that go wrong. But when we use the terminology make work optional, that's different. So make work optional says, I have enough financial resources to where I don't have to go to work, but I may choose to do so at that time.
Mhm.
So you want to have, as you're doing your own planning, it's my opinion that you want to have a work optional date that you work toward, whatever the age that is for you. And the younger that is, the more freedom you're going to have. That's how I think about it. My money should buy me freedom, convenience, time, options. It should give me options. So, and the more money I have, the more of those options I'm going to have available to me. And so if I said my work optional date is age 62, then I know I have enough money at 62 to do whatever I want. I don't have to go to work for a paycheck. I may choose to do so,
Mhm.
but I don't have to. And that's very empowering to people. And it definitely lands differently. And so, um, as it pertains to like what, and we talking about couples and how they should deal with money, I want to make sure I touch on this because money can be cause friction in a relationship, especially like spending when it comes to budgets. I'm not a big fan of budgets. I don't think budgets really work. And when I say budget, I'll define it as a line item budget where we say we're going to spend this X amount of, XYZ dollars on this, ABC dollars on that. It doesn't work because you need the amount of data that you need to gather to make it an effective budget. Nobody gathers the data, nobody takes the time to follow up with it. It only works on paper. It never works in the real world. However, that's different than knowing where your money goes. You should know
Mhm.
where your money goes, but you don't need to know where every single dollar goes. And what I recommend a lot of times in a household is to try to alleviate this friction when it comes to spending money, because nobody really wants to be told how to spend their money. A wise person once told me, you should never tell someone how to raise their kids or how to spend their own money. And I think it's very true. And so what I would recommend or often recommend is you have sort of a centralized checking account where all the money comes into. Paychecks come into this centralized checking account. And then for personal spending, however you define that, you each have your own separate checking account. And the same amount of money goes from that centralized account into each of the individual's accounts every month automatically.
Mm.
So let's say that you have $500 a month, goes to each of the husband's account gets 500, the wife's account gets 500. And that's your budget. The husband's not going to look and inspect what the wife does with her $500
Mhm.
and vice versa. That's their money, each individual. They have their own personalities, the things that are important to them. They have to manage that $500 to do things that they want to do. All the household stuff will be handled up here.
Mhm.
Pay your mortgage, grocery shopping, all that kind of stuff will be paid for from the family budget, the family bucket, but you have your own individual buckets. And it doesn't guarantee success, but it does start with the framework that says, hey, you do you, I'll do me. I'll
Yeah.
spend the money I want the way I want to. And you don't have this judgment factor that comes in when somebody tries to tell somebody else how they should spend their money.
No, I love that. And I think that would solve a lot of arguments or prevent a lot of arguments ahead of time. And the people listening here, they're already of a different mindset than the 98% of society, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't be listening to Generations of Wealth. But all of these things still come into play, even if we're really good at it. You're really good at it, I'm really good at it, and everybody here listening to is very good at it. We all deal with people, like in my world, in the real estate world, I am buying properties from people that have financial problems all the time and giving them financial advice to help them get through challenges. Literally, as we're recording this, I'm trying to buy a property from a divorced woman who, through the middle of her divorce, she had a house fire, and her ex-husband told the insurance company that she set the fire. And so now I have about 6 days to help her get out of this mess and help her buy another house for her and her 5 children to live in. And she doesn't have 5 daughters, but she has 5 children. And the financial advice going back and forth in just the last 48 hours it's been a lot. And it's the same thing. Like, we have the background, we can help, in ways that realtors can't and other people can't, because they just don't take the time to get educated in how money actually works. So it's always important to know this, study this, and get better at it.
Yeah, absolutely. In a case like that, which requires a specialized level of expertise, that's why divorce, as an example, and since you brought it up, is so difficult, is because it's not your rank and file everyday financials. You're not just putting a budget together. You're actually talking about splitting up a household from one into two, and economically, there's the same dollars needing to be needed to cover two households.
Right.
And that's why divorce is so hard on people financially, because you have twice as many housing expenses as you had before, twice as many utilities.
Mm-hmm.
So each party is going to take a step back when it comes to their quality of life, at least at the start. That's why getting the divorce process and getting the settlement and getting a fair settlement so important, particularly for women, because there's no do-overs in that world, and you've got to rebuild, have a strong, try to have a strong foundation to start, and then rebuild and move forward. You certainly can. There's certainly hope, and there's plenty of opportunity in front of you, but navigating those waters at that time is critical, because, like I said, there are no do-overs. You have to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a little bit from your bio that this was near and dear to you, just based on how you grew up, right? I mean, sounds like you came from some struggles due to divorce.
Yeah, what happened was my mom is an immigrant from South Korea, married my father during Vietnam War, and came back to the States, but has never been able to read the language, write the language, has never driven a car. And so there's clearly some cultural barriers and some just everyday barriers that she was facing when it came when the relationship with my father and her went south. And so the long and the short of it is that she ultimately had to give up custody of us four kids. There was four kids in the family at the time, young kids, and she didn't feel that she could economically support us, didn't really understand the divorce process at that time, and was at a disadvantage in that regard. And so she basically gave up custody of her four children to my father. And that is, it took me a long time to really understand the magnitude of that. When I was young, you don't really understand that.
Hmm.
And you have a lot of emotions around it, which I won't get into here, but
Yeah.
it did dawn on me at some point, like the sacrifice that she ended up making, or the situation that she was thrust into because she didn't know any better.
Hmm.
And if that were to happen today, a situation like that, and I was involved as an advisor, it would be a completely different outcome. It would be totally different because we know the rules of engagement. We could help her understand her options. And I guarantee that she would not be in a position where she felt she had to give up full custody of her children. And so, yeah, that leaves a mark. And fortunately, that relationship ended up, they were amicable later in life. And so that was all fine. But it wasn't great for her during that time, and it really wasn't great for us children either, because we really didn't know how to think about our mom not being around or having custody of us at that time. It really has colored how I think about my role and the work that I'm doing today.
Well, and honestly, that's why I brought it up, because we all have struggles. Everybody has some struggles, and they shape us. And we either take that, as you have, to do well and do good in the world and help people, or we can take the wrong turn and ruin our lives. So I think it's admirable that you did what you, or do what you do, and a lot of it was shaped by your youth, but you took it and made it a positive. So it's a great thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We've tried.
Well, that's all we all can do, right? We get up, we put our pants on, and we try. Um, so kind of winding this up, what's one question I should have asked you that I didn't?
Well, oftentimes people wonder, like, what's the first step I should do? Where
Okay.
should I start to try and get going on this? And it's a tough question to answer. I really think just getting started is like identifying where are you, or where are you with your money? How do you engage with your money? What I tend to find is that most people who are struggling with money don't engage with it regularly. When I say engage with it, I mean, they're obviously spending it. They're making it, they're spending it, but they're really not aware of where all their money goes or what it could do for them. And I think they just need to change the paradigm of like, when you think about your money, you really want to think about what job does your money have? And your money should have several jobs. Part of the one job for your money is to put food on your table and provide shelter and transportation and the basics. Another job for your money is to take care of your lifestyle needs and wants, like things you like to do that bring happiness and joy to your life. And then there's another job that your money has is, well, how is it going to take care of me down the road? As I get older and I no longer am going to work, how will there be money there that allows me to live the life that I want in the way I want to live it? And if your money isn't doing each of those jobs on some level, taking care of your basic needs, your wants, I think most folks are doing those. I think where the real neglect comes in is they're not taking care of their future needs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can just think with your future self in mind, fast forward to you're 60 years old and you're thinking about making work optional in the next 5 to 10 years, where are you? How are you going to do that? What is your life going to look like? And I don't think people put themselves in that position very often. They tend to just focus on the thing that's right in front of them. And I know life can be hard and challenging, and you do have to take care of today, but you also have to have an eye on tomorrow and say, what is my future self going to be like? And how am I preparing that person? Because it's still you.
Mm-hmm.
Your future self is still you. And I think people, when they think about investing money toward their future self, they almost feel like they're giving it to somebody else, to a different person. Like they're taking it out of their spending today and then I'm putting money, whether it's, investing through us like an advisor on their own, opening up an account. That's not really the important point, but they feel like they're giving that money to someone else. And it's not, of course, it's going to the same person. You're just delaying your gratification, but you're creating more opportunities, more options for yourself down the road. And believe me, I've helped a lot of people retire and get to that stage in life. You want to have as many options available to you when you get to that point. And the only way you create that is by building your own either income stream or have your assets or a combination of both.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ed, I really 35 minutes flew by and we could keep on going, I'm sure, for another 35 minutes, but I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate your knowledge and again, you taking, your experience with your beautiful family and your background and just really helping financially educate women. I think it's admirable. So really appreciate you being on our show.
Yeah, Derek, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Is there anything that we can do as far as following you or if anybody wants to get in touch with you, anything that we can do to help you?
Well, I'd say just go to our websites, either burningriveraag.com or EnlightenHer.com. Those are two websites, has all of our information there. Find something that resonates with you, get educated on it, and if there's something that we can help, don't be afraid to reach out. But there's a lot of good information that's free resources, especially on the EnlightenHer site. I just say get involved and get engaged.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you so much again. And we'll wind up this show. Until the next one, please help us grow the Generations of Wealth podcast. Share this where you can. Tell a friend. Give us all the reviews and likes that of course, are required on every social media platform nowadays. And until the next one, go out and live your vision and love your life. See ya.